Okay, welcome everybody. Glad to see people here. Afternoon to you all. Hope you're all keeping well, and welcome to the first of a series of webinars we're going to be doing. Some of you will know, used to do seminars up at Crown Hill for a long time. I think we did about 150 to groups of people, also presented to corporations like Lloyd's and stuff. So it's been a little while since we've actually done anything like this, and obviously in the current climate, webinars is the way to go. So thanks for coming along. Just go through the agenda. So we're going to go through a few steps just to basically get businesses from where they are now to a stronger position. And in an ideal world, we'd like to get you beyond even where you were before the whole coronavirus thing started. So we're going to go through a few steps. First one is reducing the disconnect. That will make more sense when we go through it. We're also then going to look at the need to reinvent businesses, look at a few ideas to do that, because things aren't going to be the same. And even if they were, it still makes sense to reinvent businesses and to move forward all the time. We're then going to look at some quick and easy ways to get some budgets so that you know where you're going to go. We'll then look at some opportunities and risks that will present themselves. Excuse me. Then goals and actions. We need to have a plan for you to follow. So we need to know where we're going to go, and we need an action plan. At the end of the day, it's all well and good attending webinars, but unless action's taken at the end of it, then nothing changes. And then we're going to pull all of those ideas together into a coherent, hopefully, step forward. And then we're going to look at what you need to do next after the webinar, and also tell you different ways that we're going to be able to help in supporting you and getting you through the next year, possibly longer. One comment I would make is that obviously we're going to concentrate a little bit on coronavirus and its impact on business, but I am well aware that there's a huge health issue with it as well. But largely we're going to be concentrating on businesses. So if I ignore the health aspect, that's not deliberate. It's just because it's a business webinar. So I'm perfectly aware that there are people suffering and problems, but today is purely the business aspect. So we're putting the health side to one side for the moment. So just a quick thought for the day. This is an old African proverb that says, smooth seas don't make skillful sailors. And if we apply that to businesses, what it really means is that it's easier to run a business when things are all going smoothly and there's no particular obstacles in the way. It's relatively straightforward, but you don't really learn anything about running businesses fully. In difficult times, that's when things do get difficult, and obviously skill sets come through. So hopefully today will start you on the process of getting some of those skills if you haven't already. And rest assured that whatever you're going through, many businesses are going through the same thing. So as I say, the reason for this webinar is that many of our clients and many businesses nationwide are suffering, are worried about what the future is going to bring, a load of uncertainty. So you're not alone in that situation. Okay, so we just touch on number one, which is really reducing the disconnect. And what we mean by that is that it helps businesses to become connected with different people, and we would include ourselves in that list. I hope that we've always been connected to some extent, but that needs to be ramped up. So what we need to do is we need to basically get you using best practice tools. We need to get the business growth focused. So rather than just operational focus, we need to get it thinking about how it works as a money-making machine, how it works financially. That's going to be crucial. And many of you will have come across questions and thoughts and probing from banks and lenders in recent times. If you've gone for grants or loans, you'll be starting to see sort of questions about the financial aspects of your business that maybe haven't been relevant before, but they always were, just more important now. And we'll go through some of that. And also to hopefully make you more empowered, especially if you own your business, so that you have more freedom and basically aren't just tied to the business even stronger than you were before. And to engineer a close partnership, particularly with us. So we're going to be offering more business growth services. We always have, but I suspect those are going to become more useful, more relevant. And for me personally, I will be making a deliberate move from the more what I would call traditional accountancy services, so tax and accounts. That will still get done, but I will be concentrating more and more on this side of things, business development, helping businesses get through, and hopefully that will be more valuable. So I'll be delegating more and taking on that role for you and being more available, and hopefully increase the trusted relationship that we should have already. We're also going to be assisting with a strong technology adoption, so that we'll be basically using technology to even greater standards and helping you to do the same. And also, say, developing and helping you develop strong marketing and growth skills as well. So we need a connection with various people, and that is, in the current climate, going to be people like bankers, lenders. We're going to have to forge close relationships with them. They may not have already been there for us in the past, but they're going to be absolutely crucial, both in terms of helping us, but also in terms of us not falling foul of what they're looking for. Also, solicitors, HR people, bookkeepers, all of us need to group together to help your business move forward. So we're going to delve through stuff at the end of the session. I'll be dealing with some questions. So in the little panel you've got on your screen, there is a section for questions. If you want to type anything in, don't be shy. Anything that crops up there, I'll look at the end. I won't answer as I go along, but if we get time at the end, hopefully we'll have 10 or 15 minutes to go through some of those questions and get some answers out to you. Just want to do a quick little poll just to see where we are and just get you indicating where the business lies at the moment. Just bear with me. So should have four sets of answers crop up. It's one of the four. You can just let us know where your business is at the moment in that sliding scale. None of this information will be made public. We'll combine all the scores and just feed them back to you so we can see where everybody on the course is actually at the moment, and hopefully make you be aware that you're not the only ones in that position. So if you just want to fill that in, I'll give you a minute to do that, and then we'll close it and just run through the scores. So top of the list is thriving. So if you're actually doing well, maybe even better than before during the current crisis, then thriving, right the way down to the bottom where you're seriously concerned about the future and what it's going to bring for you. Okay, we'll just close that off now. The basic scores are that 14% of you said that you're thriving. So that's good. Good news, especially as you're on this course as well as thriving. And we then got basically nobody in a position of being no different. So nobody's the same as before. So some are better. And of the ones that aren't better, it's roughly split equally. 43% said they're surviving and hopeful. Another 43% said that they're surviving and worried. So 86% of the people here today are actually worse than normal, and half of those are concerned about the future. And just one quick thought about the future. There are obviously loans, grants, bounce back loans available. My view is that we don't know what the next 6 months, 12 months holds. There have been different views on the recession, whether the coronavirus is going to be actually beaten, whether it will come back. So very uncertain times, certainly for another 6 months to 2 years. My view is if you get the chance to borrow money, bounce back loans, particularly because they're cheap, I would get them, because there's no repayments for 12 months, no interest for 12 months, and therefore no downside to having it, just in case you've got the money there. Because I think in 6 months' time, these deals won't be available, the government won't be backing them anymore, and the banks may not have enough money to be doing them anyway. So I would grab that while you can. If you don't need it in the next 12 months, great. You can just pay it back in 12 months' time. You'll have lost nothing. But if you do need it, it's better to have it now than to be looking for it in 6 months, 9 months' time and realizing it's not there. Okay, so let's just look at some ways of reinventing the business. So I've just put these scores from the poll up just so you can see how they panned out. So reinventing the business is an area I think we're all going to need to look at, and we've just sort of come up with 4 basic ways. They sort of intermingle a bit. And we'll go through them very briefly, but obviously they are all big subjects in themselves, but we'll try and come up with a few ways that you can adopt those. But before I do that, I just want to highlight how change can work in businesses. And I just want to look at a brief survey that was done. This is something you may have seen before. It was certainly presented to me by a guy called Dan Kennedy, who's done loads of business growth and marketing books, very, very good writer. And he basically pointed out that this is in America, unfortunately, but it probably is perfectly relevant to the UK. It's a 1955 survey, and what they did is they surveyed people of effectively pensionable age, business owners, those people who were expecting to retire from business, and just basically graded where they were at that point. And what they found was that 1% of the people they surveyed were defined as rich, i.e. very well off. 4% were financially secure, i.e. didn't need to worry about money. 15% were okay, didn't particularly need to worry about money, but still needed to work to keep money coming in. 30% needed financial assistance, so they basically still needed to have mortgages and stuff like that. 20% were dead broke, and 30% were just dead. So what we then do is they redid the survey in 2010. And obviously by that stage, you would think that knowledge about running businesses would be greater, technology would be greater. You know, people were talking about having spare time and what we were going to do with it all and so on. But if you look at the stats there, effectively the top half was exactly the same. So still only 1% very well off, still only 4% financially secure, still only 15% okay, but still needed to work. 40% needed financial assistance, 30% were dead broke, and only 10% were dead. So obviously that's because of health issues improving, but all that basically means is that, you know, the broke people were just living longer. So that isn't basically going to be something that happens naturally. People aren't getting wealthier naturally. It has to be something that you take action with. It has to be about what you do rather than just things moving along. So even just standing still in the current climate isn't going to help. So those stats to me say that it's about the individuals and what they do with their lives that counts, not necessarily where the world's taking you. So just look at the first way of reinventing, and this is innovation. So this is probably the most drastic of ways to go, but it is happening quite a bit. And what that means is you're introducing something brand new into the business. So we've seen that happen with certain businesses. I think Dyson basically moved from doing what they were doing in terms of manufacturing to try and make ventilation units for the NHS, and various other people are doing similar stuff, doing something completely different, which is fine, but difficult to do, especially in small businesses, because it's something that you're not used to doing. So it's a new skill set. It may need revamping the business around. We did have one client who was asked to do ventilation units because they were an engineering firm. But when they looked at it, even though they were technically capable of doing it, the amount of time it would take to retrain people, to reset the machinery and the engineering and actually get everything out and work out how it's going to all work would take 2 to 3 months. Huge cost, and they thought by that time probably things would have picked up and the demand for ventilation units and ventilators wouldn't be there. So just be careful with complete innovation. It might seem tempting to just basically go completely for something different, but often there will be a time and money cost to that before it can actually be put into place. Second one is just re-engineering. So this is really just changing or improving a service or products. So it's using what you've already got to produce something different. So there is an example, I think this was a New Zealand company who were producing beer, but they used effectively the same process, slightly tweaked, to produce hand sanitizer, again, for the health service down in New Zealand. So re-engineering is probably going to be slightly easier, which is doing what you're doing, but effectively creating something different, but in an easier way than complete reinvention. Third way is to adapt. So again, we're seeing an awful lot of this at the moment. So restaurants, obviously you're going to have to adapt to social distancing. So we're seeing that changing at the moment where they're reorganising floor spaces. They may be trying to get more outside space where the issues aren't so great, but also there's a bit more space there. We're seeing businesses adapt in terms of hours. So quite a few businesses that are going to now be restricted. So people like hairdressers and salons, where maybe they can't fit as many paying customers in their working day, are looking at the prospect of maybe spreading the staff load over a longer period of time, maybe working 7 days a week. So opening Sundays with some staff in there, maybe opening earlier, closing later, just to get the same number of customers coming through, because their numbers that they can fit in at any time are lower. We're seeing adaptation with restaurants. Obviously, you've had to adapt, otherwise they'd just be closed down. So we're seeing those do home deliveries. So a lot of the places where you normally go and pick up food or sit in and eat are now doing deliveries, which is something they can do. I've seen one top-end restaurant in Plymouth are effectively providing a box of their product. So the product they buy, which is very good purchases from local suppliers of good food that they use as ingredients, they're now supplying that as the ingredients for you to have delivered with a recipe to actually make one of their dishes yourself at home. So all of those things are going on. We're seeing obviously internet is becoming an option for people as well, but also more delivery rather than in-house performance of services or creation of products. So that's adapting to where we are. And then we've got the fourth one, which is probably the one to look at, I would suggest, before all others, because it's going to be easier. And this is really just taking what you've got and broadening how you do it. So basically slightly different offerings. So for example, if you were a hairdressing salon, what you could do is start to open early and offer a men's cutthroat razor shave before they go to work. The training would be slightly different, but effectively you've got the skills, the equipment and the premises to do that. And it would be a slightly different market, as in working men, and a slightly different time scale. So it isn't going to be a major shift in terms of how that would affect your business. So widening your lane, even before coronavirus, was certainly a good way of increasing business and getting more profit, and even more so now. And obviously another way to widen your lane is to look at the marketing channels, and maybe rather than just have a retail outlet or a salon or whatever, you can start to move into online. Maybe you can start to do your marketing in slightly different ways than you've done before. So I would think with all of those four ideas, best bet for you would be to just get the team together, as many contacts as you can, business colleagues, and just sort of brainstorm some ideas without sticking to anything too close to what was there before. I will try and go through the whole of this webinar without saying the new normal more than a couple of times, because it's become a bit of a cliche, but it's certainly where things are going. Businesses aren't going to be the same after this as they were before, and some of them may need to rethink things drastically. So leading on from that, step 3 is just looking at your budgets. Some of you will have already done this, but I'm just going to run through a few little bits and pieces and ideas that maybe will expand on what you've done. If you haven't started doing budgets, then you'll certainly need to, in my view. So personal budgets, I've put that first before business budgets because it's the business owners that need to come first. If you're in a incident on an aeroplane, one of the things you'll know that the pilots tell you to do is to put your oxygen mask on first before you then start helping others. And it's exactly the same principle in business. Business recovery planning is no different. You've got to make sure the business serves you before you can then start helping your staff, your suppliers, and everybody else connected with the business, the customers. So put your shareholder and owner hat on when you're considering moving forward with the business, and look at the personal budgets. Obviously, best way to do that is just to go through bank statements, but maybe go through them before March, because most people are finding they're spending less money at the moment because they haven't got anything to do, nowhere to go. That's going to change. So look at what you were spending before and just see how that's going to indicate what your personal budget is. Now, it may be that you will feel the need to reduce the personal budget in order to make things work. And that may have to be the case, but I would try and resist it. My thoughts on businesses are, in order for you to be happy, in order for it to work for you, you've effectively got to have the right results for you. Otherwise, I don't think it works well for everybody else. So if you're not happy with results, then you're not going to see it as a good, viable way forward. And in that case, other people will then suffer as well. So I would keep personal budgets where they need to be, but not skimp in terms of what that's going to provide you as an individual or as a family. That's ultimately what running a business is all about. It's all about the personal side. It's a means to an end. It's not a means in itself. So you get personal budget. That will basically work out what your take home needs to be. And then we'll start to look at the business budget. Now, I've listed this deliberately in the order that you would typically see things in a set of accounts that an accountant would produce. So we're starting at the top with sales, and we're then working through the profit and loss account. Then we're taking into account tax, which doesn't usually appear in the profit and loss. We're then taking off money for you to live off, which doesn't appear in the profit and loss often because a lot of business owners are on reduced salary or reduced drawings and then take the rest as loans or dividends. It also includes buying new assets, which we may need to do. That doesn't appear in the profit and loss. Repaying loans, because that needs to be done out of profit. And then hopefully leaving yourself with a bit of a war chest, which is closing cash. So I would be tempted to try and get to an end point where you have actually got a balance in your bank that is good and healthy. What banks look for, and what I would suggest is a good target, is 3 months worth of cash, which basically means that if your business had no sales, and obviously you wouldn't have to pay maybe productive wages or materials, but if you had no sales, have you got enough money to pay all the overheads for 3 months without having to borrow any further? So that's one of the things I would try and set as a target, rather than just budgeting for a nil bank balance, because there may be surprises around the corner, and my desire for you would be to have more than enough cash sat around waiting. But the thing with the layout I've got there is, when you do your business budget, I would work from bottom up. So I'd work out at the bottom what extra cash you're going to need to create, then work out what loan repayments you're going to need to make, what personal money you need, what assets you need, and that will tell you what profit you need. Then, and you may need our help with this, you can work out what tax needs to come off that profit. You can then work back and take your overheads into account, so you can work out what you need to make before overheads, and then you can use your margins to work out a budgeted sales figure. What people tend to do with budgets is they tend to work from a guessed sales figure and then work through that list and go, oh, this is what's going to be left. I would work it the other way around. I'd work out what you want to be left and then work up to what you need your accounts figures to be in terms of sales, margins and overheads. And again, that's slightly technical, and it's something we can absolutely help with. It can often be done on the back of a fag packet. It doesn't need to be overly lengthy or detailed. Just doing the basic requirement is perfectly adequate. So from there, you can have a detailed budget, and you can then break that down, obviously, into months to give you some sort of tracking as to where you want to go. And there, the crucial bit, which I think is the bit that often gets missed, is there's no measurement. So we've got to measure where we want to get to. And I would measure beyond sales figures. A lot of businesses go, I need 30,000 sales, or I need 100,000 sales this month. And all they do at the end of the month is just go, oh, we didn't get there. And they'll find some reasons for that. And then they'll go, oh, hopefully next month will be better. But there's nothing in that process to actually make things change. So what we want to do is try and break some of those figures down into component parts where we can start to work out how we make them change. So an obvious example for that is looking at what we call KPIs, key performance indicators. So often we'll look with businesses, we'll look at things like how many customers do they have, how many are they going to lose, how many are they going to gain. So that starts to tell the marketing department how many new customers they need to get. It tells the customer service department, which is technically everybody, how many customers we can afford to lose. And it also then starts to drill down into how many transactions are we going to have with these customers. So if it's a corner shop, how many people are going to come through the door? And we can measure that. And then how much do they spend? And we can measure that. And each of those little things will tell us what we need to do and what we need to change. Well, so if we just go to a corner shop, you need to make 30,000 sales this month. I suspect what they'll do is sit back and wait, see what happens. So, I use a sports analogy often is, just sitting back and waiting to see what your sales is a bit like watching the game and then seeing how your team did at the end. What you need to be doing is looking at all the stats and all the things that are going on minute by minute and tweaking so that you stand a better chance to get the result at the end that you want. So I've got on screen some software shots of, there are loads and loads of good software now that will link up to cloud accounting that will provide very good measurements. So we use a number of these with clients, and that can give us on a month by month or even week by week basis an actual picture of some key numbers and how they're working in terms of where's the business now, what's it doing, and how are all those KPIs performing. And if they're not where they need to be, we and the business owner can work together to get those numbers where they need to be by coming up with ideas. Then if you just look at sales or big numbers like overheads, it's just too big an issue to try and work out what actions you need to take. Like I say, it's not just the obvious numbers like sales and overheads, it's some of the detailed numbers. But I would try and keep the KPI numbers, certainly initially, to just the key ones, and we can help guide you on what they are, maybe just 5 or 6. If you start measuring everything, the danger is you just spend your whole life measuring and not enough time doing and trying to change those numbers. So that's stage 3. Stage 4 is just looking at the opportunities and risks. Fairly obvious, I think, but it's worth doing. Bigger businesses and more technical webinars would mention SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. I've just said concentrate on 2. Opportunities. There will be opportunities. A lot of people see recessions and crises as a means of becoming wealthier, and they will. But bear in mind there are, good things happening at the moment, and there are things that may benefit you, not necessarily benefit everybody, but there will be more employment issues, so there will be better and more employees out there to potentially help your business. There will be competitors that will be falling by the wayside. They might be exiting early because they don't want to carry on. They may be forced to stop. So all of these present opportunities. So look at your figures so far and decide what you want to do. And again, I'd only look at 5 big key opportunities to pursue. So you might need new premises. You might actually decide you don't need new premises or need premises you've got. I think a lot of professional businesses are now working from home going, why did we need these big offices and pay rent and rates? So there will be opportunities out there. Identify them, brainstorm them, and then pick the 5 best and most impactful and start working towards those. And similarly, look at the risks, look at the vulnerabilities, because there will be some. There's obviously going to be potentially financial ones, but there may be others. There may be issues with your customers having less spendable money. There may be issues with your suppliers going out of business, so you may have to look for new suppliers, etc., etc. There may be a recession where prices go up. So all sorts of vulnerabilities, try and work out what they're going to be and how you're going to deal with those. So take advantage of opportunities, try and eliminate vulnerabilities. I'll go through this very quickly because it's quite technical and long-winded, but again, what we would suggest people do as part of the vulnerabilities is identify and manage risks within the business. So there'll be a number of risks, which I've listed on the right there. Leadership is particularly one where things like communication and doing all the things we're talking about today are crucial. There'll be risks with products and services. Some of them will no longer be needed. Some of them will need to be tweaked. Some of them may not be capable of being produced. So we need to identify those. There could be operational risks, marketing risks, and so on. And with all of those, we have got procedures and software that will go through those, highlight them, and then grade them so that you can work out which ones are the ones that you need to look at first, because every business will have hundreds of risks. There's a risk that the building might catch fire. There's a risk that, all the team might be, laid off long-term sick, whatever. All of those things can happen, but some of them would be more likely and more serious than others. So the printer conking out and needing a new one is a risk, but it's not a particularly important one for most businesses. So we need to assess them, grade them, and make sure that all the big ones are dealt with. And then from all of those things comes your goals. So once you've identified everything, the opportunities, the vulnerabilities, etc., we need to start working towards a business recovery plan that brings all those things together. So I think we're now moving on to the bit that says we know some of the things we need to do. Goals starts to suggest that we need to be doing something. A lot of people actually know what to do, but don't put time aside or don't have religious goals set aside or accountabilities to team members to help drive that forward. And if you read business books, particularly biographies of successful people, they are almost obsessed with goals. They'll have list of goals printed on their mirror when they shave or wash in the morning. They'll have them beside the bed, so when they wake up, they're there. It sounds over the top to a lot of us, but they do work. Not just because they're there, but also because subconsciously your mind takes them in and tends to work more with those goals than without. It's a bit like the psychological process when if you're about to buy a yellow Volkswagen Beetle, you tend to notice more of them around town. You suddenly, oh, there's one, never seen that before, and there seems to be hundreds. That's your brain basically being geared to notice things that are relevant, and that's how goals work as well. If you keep telling your brain what your goals are and what's relevant, it tends to basically work towards them subconsciously. So putting it all together, what we're really looking for then is to start to basically get a package together where all of those things are built into a business recovery plan. So you may already have bits of them, and you don't have to necessarily do all of them, although I think they're all pretty relevant. So you'd have your personal budget, you'd have your business forecast, certainly for 3 months, but probably 12. You'd have a risk register, you'd have an opportunities and vulnerabilities list and how you're going to deal with that. You'd possibly have an updated organisation chart. I think that's quite a useful thing. Lots of businesses, especially small ones, don't do that. But I would recommend that even small businesses, even one-man bands, create an organisation chart. We can give you a template and actually put names in the boxes. So who's the sales manager? Who's the salesperson? Who's the finance manager? Who's the bookkeeper? And even though you know your name's in that because you're a sole trader and you're the only person there, it starts getting you thinking about how you would basically evolve the business and get people to do the stuff in the bottom level so that you can move up and become more of an entrepreneur and a business owner rather than just a doer. And obviously, a lot of the stuff at the bottom doesn't earn as much money as the stuff at the top, and is more easily delegatable as well. So it's quite easy to get payroll and bookkeeping done by anybody, including us. Doesn't have to be done by a one-man band. Frees up time to do all these things we're talking about and make more money. And you might have in your plan a finance application of sorts. I suspect that for a lot of us that's now done and dusted. Hopefully everybody's got what they think they need for the future. But I say, if not, then that whole package is very good to present to banks and lenders as part of a finance application. So possibly may be able to do away with organisation chart, may be able to do away with finance application, but I would certainly look at doing all of the other things that we've talked about as part of a business recovery plan. I'm going through some of these obviously quite quickly just to fit them into the time we've got today, but I'll go through at the end how you can move forward with this, how we can help you in a bit more detail. So don't worry if we're skipping through, but if you have got specific questions, then pop those in the question box and I'll try and cover them. The reality is with webinars is that if you're going, what the hell is he talking about? Don't understand that at all. Chances are everybody else listening is thinking the same. So if you've got questions, I'll cover them later on. So we want a complete package. We're calling it a business recovery plan, but it's effectively all those things brought together. And just an example of how it might look is, and I say this can vary from person to person, but okay, this is broadly the one we use and we can help you with. An executive summary, so just basically a summary of all the things we've talked about. It's quite handy for lenders, people connected with the business, staff, suppliers, customers maybe, to know what the sort of top view is, the overall summary, which is called an executive summary before you get into the detail. So then we start to basically bring the financial numbers together, starting with what the person who runs the business or people who run the business need. That's ultimately what you want out of the business. It's no good having, 200 grand profit if you actually need 200 grand to repay loans. So you do need to be able to enjoy money as a business owner. So we list that there. We basically work out where you are now. We work out where you need to be in the future, typically 3 years, but in the current crisis, some people are looking at a bit earlier than that. Maybe where do we need to be in a year? What finance do we need? So what key things are going to be needed to make that work? And then we have business budgets. So we obviously have the figures we talked about earlier. What sales are we going to need? What gross profits? What gross profit percentage does that mean we need to achieve? That's an efficiency measurement. That's how quality we do our work, what quality margins we make on selling stuff, what's our overheads, and therefore what's the net profit. And we basically build that down through the list I gave you. So that then, in this case, is allowing us to draw out £50,000. We're going to sell some assets to bring some more money in, etc. And that means that we want a budget for an extra £10,000 cash at the end of the period. And we've got columns there to record the actuals on a quarterly basis. But as I say, we've got software that will record it weekly or monthly if needs be. And I suggest monthly is probably the best bet in the current climate. We want to be making decisions, seeing what's working, what's not working monthly, not quarterly. And then once we've got all those, we start to identify what key performance indicators are we going to address. What opportunities and vulnerabilities are we going to address? And what's our 90-day goals? What's our 90-day actions? And just as importantly, who's responsible for those? Because it shouldn't be just the business owner. And when are they going to get it done? What's the deadline? So if you've got a bigger team, that basically tells everybody what they're responsible for, what the expected numbers are, so how are we going to measure success, and when are we going to start to look to see when that's working. And that would be reviewed, I say, on a monthly basis, but particularly after the 90-day process, but obviously would be discussed at a business level on a more regular basis. We do this in our team, and we do that weekly. We discuss all of these key numbers on a weekly basis on Monday morning. Obviously, we measure them formally monthly, but we're actually discussing them very regularly. So all the departments are laid out with all of the actions, all of the goals, all of the numbers that we're expecting, and everybody then involved knows exactly what they've got to do. And obviously they would ask for help if they're struggling to get those numbers, rather than just leave it. But at least there's an action plan of what to do. So let's just look at taking action. As I say, just listening to this webinar and taking some of the information in will hopefully make you more wiser, make you more aware. But if that's all that happens, then I can guarantee that nothing is going to change when you get back to your businesses later, and it never will, because the key is not knowledge. Knowledge is important, but it's actually what you do with it that's more important. So action is absolutely key in terms of driving businesses forward. So we need to be understanding what we need to do at the end of this session, who's going to do it and what's going to get done. So I just want to take you on a slight tangent, if you can bear with me for a minute. If you can just imagine that there is a probably about 3 inches wide scarlet ribbon, and that's draped around the equator from one point on Earth right the way round the full circumference of Earth. And that length of that scarlet ribbon completely around the Earth represents the amount of time that planet Earth has been in existence. And I want you to think about how much of that ribbon would be represented if we just looked at the bit of time where humans, Homo sapiens, were on the planet. So just have a think about that for a sec. I'll just have a glass of water. So we take that scarlet ribbon that goes around the Earth and then go, which bit of that is represented by how long humans were here? That works out to basically about a mile. So only 1 mile of that ribbon is the bit when we humans occupied the Earth compared to Earth being around. And then more importantly, and you'll start to see where this is going, which bit of that mile of tape is represented by our time on Earth? And that comes down to about just over 2 foot, 2¼ foot is us. So out of all that ribbon that goes around the world for however long the planet's been around, we and our lives represent about 2¼ foot. And I suspect, I don't want to be guessing people's ages or anything like that, but on average, I would suspect that based on the people here, half of that ribbon for our time has passed. So what we've got left is about 1 foot's worth of ribbon, which is the future for us. And obviously what happens in that period is absolutely the crucial bit. It's what we do and how quickly we do it. And the most successful people are very aware of that ribbon and how long it is. There's a great book by Michael Gerber called The E-Myth Revisited, which is, if you don't read many books, that's probably the one I would suggest you absolutely should. It's written for small businesses, and he basically says that the biggest problem with people and business owners particularly is that they think that they're never going to die. So they just go day to day, just doing the same things as they've done before, and eventually they'll get to the end of the business and then look back and go, if only it had been better or different. So it's crucial that what we do now with the time we've got is as quickly as possible start to do things that are going to drive businesses forward. Hopefully that isn't too somber a thought for you, but it's absolutely, I say, vital in my view that we do take into account that there is more to just plodding along in a business. Absolutely moving it forward is essential. So let's just recap on some steps. Step one is, I say, we've got to look at ourselves first. So we need to put the oxygen mask on us first and work out where we want to go. Step two is we then basically make a business and personal plan about where we want to end up. Not let the business drive us. So we can sit in a rudderless boat and just see where the tide takes us, see where the wind takes us and see where we end up. might be somewhere nice, it might not, but you get no control over that. Whereas if you actually have a map and you have a rudder and you have an engine, you can take that boat to wherever you want it to go to, and deciding where you want to end up is crucial, because that's where you want to drive to. And I would suggest that when we picture that end place that we want the business to be, that we don't downgrade the requirements too much. There's a temptation for some businesses just to go, oh, I'd like 3% growth this year. It covers inflation. That's not a wild, ambitious target. So even in the current times, do think ambitiously, because research has shown that wherever you set your targets, you're likely to come just underneath. So people like Alan Sugar knew from the age of about 10 that they were going to be millionaires. That's where they set the target, and they're far more likely to get there than if we just go, I would be a millionaire if I win the lottery. But other than that, it'd be nice to have, a £50,000 income or £55,000 income. So don't downgrade the requirements too much, even though you might be tempted to in the current situation. Doing nothing is not an option. We have to do something. Step 3 is focus on what you can do. There'll be lots of things that aren't going to be possible. We just have to deal with those. There's no point spending too much time worrying and dealing with things that we have no control over. Obviously, we can try and risk assess and work out how we're going to deal with those if they happen. But at the end of the day, we're mostly concentrating on what we can do in the business, rather than worrying about what things are going to happen to you that you have no control over. And lastly, obviously, which we'll touch on in a sec, is get some help from us. We're here to help. I'm going to be devoting a lot more time to help businesses get through this next stage. We've gone through the sort of fright stage, I think, and we're now in the sort of surviving stage. My aim is to get you to the third stage, which is thriving, so that we're not just basically getting from day to day as best we can, but that we're actually in a good, comfortable position, regardless of what the economy and everything's throwing at us. And that's certainly possible. So take help from us. I'll go through some of the ways we can help, free and otherwise, for you to look at. So support-wise, there's a few immediate things we can do, which I've highlighted. There are a number of others, but these are the ones particularly relevant today. So we could do a full online business recovery planning session. So that would be a meeting of possibly 4 hours, or to make it slightly easier, 2 2-hour sessions to get all of the things we just talked about done, brainstorm them and come up with a definitive plan that you can take back to your team and your partners, etc., and work with. We could just do a cash flow forecast and business plan. So that's just the financials to work out where financially you go. Even though I'm biased, I think there is a need for accountants to get involved in cash flow forecasts, because most forecasts I've seen either tend to be just profit, which doesn't help you understand what cash you're going to raise from that profit, or it tends just to be a cash flow, which doesn't then help work out what profit you need, or in some cases it's a mix of the two without actually realizing that they're two separate things. And very rarely does a self-generated forecast contain a balance sheet forecast, which is absolutely essential in my view as well, and is something that banks expect to see. So we can do a forecast and business plan. A few clients we've actually offered to do that early on in the crisis for free, just to help out. It'll probably be a 3-month forecast. So if I have offered that, that still stands. But obviously we can now do full forecasts and business plans for anybody in the future. If you don't want to step that far forward immediately, then we've also got a complimentary business recovery review. That's a brief online meeting, probably about 45 minutes to an hour, just to go through some basic details, get you thinking, try and get some of these answers in place. So it will move you forward in terms of getting through what we've talked about for the 7-step process. And we can also have a slightly more generic meeting, which is called a complimentary client review. So it is only available for those that are clients at the moment, where we just sit down and just work out how we're going to make more money, what targets do we need, what measurements should we have, and we'll start to look at some ideas on how those measurements might be able to be tweaked. So slightly less to do with recovery, but just general profit growth as a particular thing. So if you're not sure which, if any of those might be best, I'm quite happy to take phone calls and chat through them, but there is no shortage of support and help available our end. A few other bits that are going to be available free as well, which we've mentioned in previous communications, but I'll run through them again. There's a whole raft of stuff on the website, including a whole section to do with coronavirus, financial assistance and information about the furlough claims, etc. So I say there's probably thousands of pages of stuff on a dedicated coronavirus page on our website. We've mentioned the complimentary client review. So we're quite happy to do 45 minute sessions just to get you going. This is the first, hopefully, of many webinars that we'll be doing in different areas. Probably the ones that we're planning next will be the 7 ways to grow your business. So that will be a more in-depth look at exactly how you can make the business go forward financially. So looking at the drivers of making profit and cash. And we'll do one on financial awareness, which is understanding your figures, which a lot of people balk at because they see that as something they don't really need to understand. If you're a plumber, why would you need to understand financial accounts? Well, hopefully in the current crisis, you've come to realize that that knowledge is essential because everybody else is looking at it and making judgments about you in terms of your viability. So if you can't make those same judgments, then things aren't going to be great. So it's a course that is a lot less technical than you would imagine, a lot more practical. And when we did, I think, about 150 seminars, that one subject got the highest rating out of all 150. So that's definitely worth going to, even if you might be thinking, that doesn't sound like something I'll enjoy. So we've got that. We've also got, if you're a client, we've got free software that we may have mentioned to you, but you might have sort of put to one side. So there's a very comprehensive sales and marketing system, Core Asset Vault, written not by me, but a very clever guy called Steve Hackney, who's worked in sales and marketing for 30 odd years, worked with some of the best companies, and that's all for small businesses. It's all done by paint by numbers, effectively. It tells you exactly what to do. So you or your marketing department can use that completely free, and that sells, I think, on the open market for about £400 or £500 a month. So very valuable. So make sure you've got that. We've also got some other software. There's a mini cash forecasting software called Fluidly, which I think is very useful for just planning your next 3 months cash flow. So if you haven't seen that, just put a little message in the chat box or question saying Fluidly, and I'll come back to you after this webinar with some information. And in our e-newsletter recently, we mentioned a positivity program from a guy called James Ashford, who's a very good presenter. He's created an online course about getting the positives out of everything, and it's become more relevant, obviously, recently. And he's made that available for free to us or to you through us. So if you haven't got details of that, it's not a long course, but a really, really good one to go through just to slightly cheer you up after this webinar. You might need it. So if you haven't heard about that or know how to get it, again, just put positivity in the question chat. Okay, just see if there's any quick questions. I'll just go through for 5 or 10 minutes. Just bear with us while I just see what we've got. Yeah, one person's asked for the Core Asset Vault, so I'll get that over. Another question is, work's going to be very busy. How do we find the time to do all these things? Good question, but I think the reality is, what happens if you don't do those? So it's possibly what you need to do is look at how you get rid of some of your time slowly. So you can basically delegate certain things. We've got ways of assessing what work you're doing that might not be suitable for the current time. So if you're doing things like bookkeeping, as a business owner, I would stop that and get somebody else to do that straight away. If you're doing payroll, stop that. And there are various other things you're probably doing that aren't crucial, either because if you stopped it, nothing would really go wrong, or there are other people that could deal with it. So I think, in the short term, rather than add more time to what probably is going to be a very busy period anyway, is I'd be looking at trying to get other people to do some of the more basic stuff, and possibly, use other people like us to guide you through it quicker, rather than it taking up a lot of time. The downside for business owners is generally, if they haven't done this before, there's going to be a learning curve as well as a doing curve, whereas we can actually eliminate the learning curve. So I know, money's tight as well as time, but that might be one of the ways. Another quick question is, it's a similar thing, which is, if this is costing, where's that money coming from in the current economic climate? I think, depending on what things you're looking at, but some of those things are free. So I would certainly suggest that for the sake of an hour, we can move you forward quite drastically with just that 1 hour. So if money is an issue, and it might be for some, I would still be tempted to do those and then see where that might get you. Some of our profit growth based services are often done on a success only basis. So if we're looking at KPIs and moving profit forward, we can often negotiate a results based fee rather than a fixed fee. It always amazes me that marketing consultants charge a fixed fee, and if you ask them to basically redo the fee based on success, i.e. if they double your sales, they get a load of money, they'll never do it, because they're never sure that it will work. So if it's profit growth stuff, so if we're looking at growing profit, sometimes, not always, but we can do a success-based thing, or we can certainly do it over a period of time. And even the fixed fees for a business recovery plan can be phased over a 12-month repayment program to fit better, so that hopefully you'll start to get the rewards before the money starts leaving. So I think some of them there are, with us or any other supplier that you may go to, we're quite flexible in terms of how we do that. Our main aim is to try and help you, but I think a lot of these things do come with their own internal return on investment. So very quickly, the time spent can start to generate that back. Even at £800 for a session, it's not difficult to find ideas or ways forward, to cover that quite easily. So use the free sessions to get that confidence if needs be. But I would say, the downside is, what if you do nothing? If you're thriving, then that might be fine. Don't need anything at this stage. But even thriving businesses probably can go 10-50% more with help. So have a chat. We're quite happy to look at any of those. Okay, so I say, any other questions, do feel free to email me. I'll give you some support details at the end. And I say, do try and register for any future webinars that come up. They will be recorded, so we will get you a recording of this and a workbook shortly afterwards. But it's always good to come live, partly because it helps me if I'm talking to real live people rather than just recording it. But also it means you get to ask specific questions and delve into what we're talking about, whereas with the recording you can't. So questions we've done, just a parting thought is basically just a quote there, is things may never go back to normal. You need to create a new normal, and that's okay. So that's, I think, the second time I've said new normal, and that will be the only 2 times I've mentioned it. But yes, we need to accept that it's very unlikely that we'll be going back to exactly what we had before. So we need to be aware of that and realise that that's fine. That is how it's going to be. And the reality is, we were always recommending that businesses move forward quickly anyway. So change was always the way forward. Even in the past, standing still was actually moving backwards. So don't worry about things changing. That is good and healthy. We just need to deal with it. So thank you all for attending today. Hope you found some use out of some of those things. I know we've had to go through an awful lot of stuff quite quickly, but as I say, there are individual sessions we can run for you or programs that will go through that in more detail. If you've got questions that you weren't prepared to ask now, do feel free to email me or ring. Contact details I'll leave on the screen there for a moment. So I say, hope you get back to your businesses shortly and get things moving, and hopefully if we can help in any way, we're here for you. Just get in touch and hopefully see you at the next webinar as well. Thank you.